When it comes to defining the reasons why this planet has become a victim of drastic and bizarre weather anomalies and sudden Earth changes, we are provided with mixed signals from NASA, from the NOAA, and from the USGS. We were told that climate change was a product of a warming planet, one that was heating up from excessive carbon emissions, which the NOAA labeled as global warming. The USGS continuously downgrades the intensity of earthquake activity, while indicating that any uptick is primarily the result of a decrease in sunspots and because our sun is moving into a period of solar minimum. NASA informed the world back in 1983 that their infrared telescope IRIS had discovered the presence of a heavenly body as large as Jupiter in the outer reaches of our solar system. After publishing their discovery in the Washington Post, NASA went silent on their announcement, and they did so for 30 years, until 2016, when they suggested the presence of a large body in our solar system, which they call Planet 9. While announcing these major discoveries, they continued to deny the existence of Planet X. But here is the latest news on this elusive planet from NASA. Because no matter how many times they attempt to change their story, the subject of Planet X refuses to go away. It remains as much a mystery today as it was some 30 years ago. On October 4th, via a press release, NASA announced that there will be remembered as the year of unprecedented events, a series of influential changes brought upon the Earth that exceed our expectations and therefore cannot be dismissed. Since April of last year, when I first began narrating weekly video presentations, I have attempted to incorporate pieces of the puzzle that would strongly suggest the presence of a celestial intruder in our solar system, a foreign traveler that has the potential to create havoc on the Earth in the manner of climate upheaval and radical Earth changes. There are those who adamantly disregard the theory of a Planet X as the cause of dramatic Earth changes. But in doing so, they do not offer an alternative reason for the changes that are happening. Even NASA will admit that something very big is perturbing the solar system, although they will not admit to the probability that an intruder has already been discovered. Now, I have conducted years of research and study on the subject of Planet X with the intent of determining whether a binary star system was perturbing the inner solar system. Unfortunately, there are some individuals who devote the bulk of their time to surfing the web for information that will discredit the work and the intent of the researcher. To be candid, there are a number of sensationalists on the internet whose real intent is to exploit the theory of Planet X in order to garner attention and notoriety, which then serves their own self-interests. Irrespective of their intent, my research is genuine, which purpose is intended to seek the truth with respect to the strange behavior of our planet in recent years. The changes that we are experiencing do not happen suddenly. It is a gradual process that often goes unnoticed by most of us. When a catastrophe does occur, such as the horrific wildfires that are now happening in Northern California, if such an event does not affect us directly, then it is quickly forgotten and it just becomes another sensational headline for the media outlets. Is the media eager to discredit the theory of Planet X and anyone who supports it? It seems that publishers go out of their way to humiliate and degrade researchers, accusing them of setting fraudulent dates for the demise of planet Earth, and then going as far as to label them as charlatans. This would then be considered an orchestrated effort by media moguls to protect their own interests. A misinformation campaign conducted through the use of catchy headlines such as this one, with the intent to confuse and bewilder those who follow this story. If Planet X does not exist, then why are astronomers and astrophysicists from the most prestigious institutions in the world searching for it?
Friday, October 22nd, 7:40 p.m. Mountain Time, 2017. You're looking at the upper jet of planet Earth. It's carrying right now, as I do this video, a very large atmospheric river, as you can see right here on the Northeast Pacific visible loop. It's taking aim at British Columbia, the state of Washington, Oregon, parts of Northern California, well inland as this thing progresses in the days ahead. It's carrying a lot of rain and packing some very, very strong winds. Expect conditions to deteriorate tonight, tomorrow, into Sunday. You could see up to a foot of rain in the Portland area, southeast of Seattle. I'm going to show you the precipitation totals right now. This is right now, in fact, and you're seeing a half an inch of accumulation in places. We're going to step it forward to the 22nd, 48 hours from now, and we have an entirely different platform here. We're looking at 10 inches in the northeastern part of Portland right there. That's about 25 miles from Portland. 10 inches of rain. Those same numbers are scattered from Salem up to Vancouver and down the coast. So these like two troughs of energy dropping large amounts of rain in the next 48 hours. You can see 10 inches, maybe 12 inches in some places. If you go ahead a full week and look at the western coast of Canada, you're seeing totals in the 16, 17, 18 inch range. Up in here especially 18 inches in the northwestern part of British Columbia. Mainly coastal, but right there, there's a 16 inch spot I'll show you real quick. Here's the storm. I mean, it's just absolutely enormous. But if you go to this part of British Columbia, it's a good chance there could be mudslides in this area here. Community called Bella Coola. Wouldn't be surprised if there weren't some mudslides in this area. It's going to be significant flooding because they're going to see 16 inches of rain, maybe more. Haggensburg, this entire area, those rivers are going to be put to the test. So a big storm, yet another overachiever taking aim at the Pacific Northwest, Canada. The storm's
warming, ladies and gentlemen. So global warming, simply the magnetic field force has weakened. The protons are going forward and backward between the two magnetic poles. They collide at a higher speed and generate higher energy. But we also have a climate, I would call it exchange, not change. Why? Because the temperature belt that I spoke about earlier are tilting along. If the magnetic pole is moving from Canada towards Siberia, and this is happening, the whole of the temperature belt is tilting along. So regions or countries like North America are getting warmer, and regions or countries like Middle East are getting cooler. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, the reason of global warming and climate change. Has it been done before? Over 1,000 years ago, the University of Extremadura in Spain had found ancient texts done by the Arabs over 1,000 years ago. They speak of bitter cold in the Levant countries, Syria, Saudi, northern of Saudi, Iraq. And at that point in time, you will see that the distance of Arabia to the magnetic pole then in Siberia is the same distance as Europe to the magnetic pole in Canada. So Arabia at that point in time enjoyed a climate very much like what Europe is enjoying today. And this is a proof also that the temperature belt is moving along with the magnetic pole. Now, one more thing, that the two magnetic poles are in isolation of each other. They move freely. And in the last century, the two magnetic poles have distanced from one another like 1,900 kilometers. And this had led to a weaker magnetic field in the middle, as the magnetic field has to travel longer distance. And this has caused what is called the South Atlantic anomaly, which is an area of very weak magnetic field and overheated temperature. Where is these magnets coming from? I spoke earlier a story of 3 magnets. If we look, we all know that Earth is bulged. Why? Because it spins quickly about its axis. So the equatorial part of it trying to run through space, and the gravity is pulling it. So it is bulged. But this bulge is also repeated in the inner layers inside the planet. And it depends on the radius, and it depends on the thickness of the material. And by simple math, we find that the outer core, which is a viscous liquid, is 3 much bulged as the crust. And you will find out that this helps to keep the planet spinning about its axis, as I will show you. Now, the inner core, scientists, they tell it's an isotope, so it keeps emitting free electrons. These free electrons swim, flow in the outer liquid, viscous outer core. But since Earth is spinning, such a move of electrons seems to be going in spiral. And of course, we know if we have a rotating electric current, we get magnetic field. So we end up by having 2 magnetic fields opposite each other, parallel to the axis of rotation, and fixed. But hang on a second. The magnetic pole is moving, as we saw before. So the magnetic field that we observe on the surface must be coming from a different source. It's not generated. It's not induced. In fact, in the heart of the planet, we have 3 magnets. 2 generated from the electric loops, and 1 is a permanent magnet. And this 1 permanent magnet is observed when you go to the Antarctic. You find the north magnetic pole. You go to the Arctic, you find the south magnetic pole. But then you find pockets of small south magnetic poles on both ends of the planets, on both caps of the planets. And this is simply, as I explained earlier, the 2 induced, 2 generated will appear as small pockets of south magnets, but there is 1 strong permanent magnet. And then scientists think the magnetic field might be reversing in the Antarctic. It's not reversing. These small south magnets, or we call them plasmoids, have existed only 10,500 years ago, which means Earth was not spinning as fast then. Because had it been spinning, you would have had electronics moving in circles and induced magnetic fields. But since we don't have them before 10,500 years ago, it means Earth was spinning slow. So how does this bulge outer core in which electrons flow help the planet to spin? Very simple. If you have electric current and you have magnetic field, you get force. The left hand rule, or Lorentz force. So this force exercising along the perimeter of the outer core and the inner mantle helps the planet to spin. Now, what happens when the angle between the magnetic and the electric current gets smaller and smaller? If it gets smaller, the force will be less. So the planet will spin slower, and the day will be longer than 24 hours. If the angle reaches 0, there will be no force, and the planet will stop from spinning. You may wonder, has it been observed before? I'm coming to that. Some people are smiling. That's good. If the angle goes on a negative trend, then the force will be on the opposite side, and the sun will arise from the west. Very simple. Now, has it been done before? History. Where do I find history? On ancient temples, as well as in holy books, Old Testament, New Testament, Quran. These include history chapters. In the Old Testament, Earth stopped twice at the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, where the night lasted longer than 3 days. And later, when Joshua was fighting in Palestine, the sun and the moon stopped. Actually, Earth stopped, as the angle between the magnetic and the current reached 0. But what made it so? What made a magnet to tilt? It's another magnet. It's another planet. It takes a magnet to tilt a magnet. Well, this planet, has it been observed? Yes. Again, it has been observed at the night where Egypt entered into 3 nights long. as well as it has been observed by Abraham. Now, the difference between Moses and Abraham is 5,000 years. The difference between Moses and us is 3,500 years. So there seems to be a cycle of repetition. Every 3,500 years, there are changes happening above our head that is causing our magnet to tilt and accordingly Earth to enter into this dilemma. But let's go back from history and find out if the angle between the magnetic field force and the current is changed. Does it impact the number of days within the solar year? Yes. Now a solar year has 365 days. In the previous cycle, 160 days. In the previous cycle, 96 days. And this has an impact on the aging process of the human species. Human species age by the succession of day and night. They don't age by the solar number of solar years, thanks to the pineal gland. So, where is this planet that has a magnet that tilts our magnets coming from? If it comes every 3,500 years, and then when it comes twice in 50 years, it means it has an elliptic path. And actually, NASA is trying to find out. They have sent their WISE, Wide Infrared Space Explorer, trying to figure and to image the Oort cloud and find out about this planet. As it approaches, first thing it does, it pulls some of the magnetic field force lines, and this causes losses of these lines. That's why when you are in Paris or Rome, looking at the sky, measuring the magnetic field, you think it's weakening. It's not, because at the source, at the north magnetic down there, it's 100% strength. It's only lost a couple of magnetic force line with the other magnet. And that causes, as discussed earlier, weakening of the field, protons traveling faster, hitting oxygen and nitrogen, and generating more heat, and causing global warming. But more than that, if you look into how to verify that the north magnetic at the south has not weakened, simple. While at the Arctic, the ice cap is melting, at the Antarctic, the ice cap is growing. Why? Because the magnetic field is untouched, is as strong as ever at the source. So, also, when this planet approaches, when its magnets approaches, it pulls our magnets. So that explains why the magnetic pole is moving from Canada towards Siberia. So put one and one together. Global warming, gentlemen, ladies, is not caused because of CO2 or any man-made interference. CO2, by the way, is good for plants. And as I mentioned, the temperature built will tilt along with the magnetic pole. The action that I'm suggesting is, first of all, let's define when exactly. I had looked into the Mayan. The Mayan were not prophesizing. They were using astronomy to determine the cycle. And actually, the scientists who deciphered the Mayan back in 1927 had made a mistake. They assumed, because the Mayan has used number of years to explain their cycle, the scientists assumed that the solar year is 365 days. But that's true in this short cycle, 3,500 years. But what about the one before? It was 160, but they didn't know that. Applying the right number of days per year, it ends up that the Mayan cycle is a 7,000 years, is not a 5,100 year. 2, nothing will happen in December 2012. In fact, if they're right about their astronomical equation, it will be 2017. So